Good morning and welcome to our webinar, 5 Signs You Need to Think About Rebranding and 5 Steps for Getting It Right, with Greg Stone from Whiteford and Orsolya Herbein from Brand 3. You have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing them into the questions panel on your questions pane. If you would like to send in your questions at any time, we will collect these and address as many as possible at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to view that recording along with a copy of the slide presentation within 48 hours. I will now turn it over to Greg and Orsolya.
Thanks, Ariel. And hey, everyone, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Thrilled to have you here. Thrilled to be here with Orsolya to present on this topic on a kind of dreary and rainy day in Baltimore. But nonetheless, it's opening day, so a return to baseball season. Yay, Orioles! Hopeful we'll have another great season. And the city needs some positivity right now. So again, just great to have you here. Great to be here. I'm Greg Stone. I'm a patent, trademark, and general intellectual property attorney here at Whiteford, Taylor, and Preston in Baltimore, where I co-chair our technology and intellectual property practice group. So clients come to me when they realize that the product, services, and branding that they've developed are at risk of being copied in the marketplace, and I help protect them by wrapping them in patent, trademark, and other IP protections. I've been in practice, or in the field, I should say, for 32 years, and actually started my career as an examiner at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So that's me in a nutshell. Orsolya?
Hi, welcome everyone. So glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Orsolya Herbein. I'm president and brand strategist at Brand 3, which is a small branding and marketing agency, where we empower business owners with the right way to market. And what we do all day and every day is lots and lots of rebrands. And after the rebrands, we can take these brands to market. And my background is in graphic design. I started as a graphic designer, an in-house designer for a pharmaceutical agency until I met my now ex-business partner, because he retired last December, Matt Christ, and we partnered and put our freelance businesses together to form Brand 3 and serve local and businesses nationwide with branding.
Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and dive in. And again, the topic for today is signs that you need to think about in rebranding. But before we get into those signs, there are some pervasive myths, both from the legal side and from the business branding and marketing side, that we want to try to work to dispel a little bit before we dive in. So I'm going to take the first one, again, from the legal perspective, just the myth that I hear way too frequently, that it's just too difficult and too expensive to go through the formal process of trying to protect my marks. So fundamentally, your brand is a critical asset. Really, it's your reputation in the marketplace. So if somebody else enters the marketplace with a similar name or identity to what you have, that they can fool consumers into buying their products instead of buying your products. So obviously that presents a lot of danger for you as a business owner. Loss of your business, loss of or damage to your reputation, and ultimately costly lawsuits. So going through the process, number one, just looking at cost. Trademarking, it's not a bank-breaking investment for something that can really become an absolutely critical asset. The grand scheme of legal expenses, trademarking really requires a budget of just a few $1,000s, as opposed to tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars you could end up spending if you get into litigation. And yes, there are issues that can increase that, but generally speaking, if you got a distinctive mark that associates with clearly defined goods and services, it's really going to be in that range of just a few $1,000s, and it's a very, very wise investment. And the process is really pretty straightforward. You start off with clearing the mark with a search, you draft and file the trademark application, you confer with the USPTO examiner on whatever issues the examiner raises during their review, which is typically going to be about 8 months after you file the application, and then you await the registration. So again, it doesn't have to be a complex process, particularly where you have a clear and a distinctive mark. And really, my thought is that you can spend the money up front to avoid spending much more down the line. The more distinctive your brand is, the easier the process is going to be with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And to me, it's really helpful to compare the costs of making that initial investment to shore up your trademark rights against the cost exposure of not doing it, which can, again, include costs of well, creating all new branding from scratch, and costs to litigate against somebody that came up with a similar name because they know you don't have a federal trademark registration. And those costs can obviously be many, many times the investment that you go through to obtain a federal registration. So that's one of the first myths I wanted to dispel. Orshi, what myth can you inform us on?
Yeah, so the myth is that branding is only about logos and visual elements. I hear this all the time. Branding is very misunderstood. And, you know, I'm not saying that the definitions of brandings that I hear from business owners are way off, because I think they're kind of all right. It's just that they are not isolated like that. So branding is not your logo. It's not your website. And I also hear that I don't need a brand because branding is for the larger corporations. You know, it's not for the small guys. You know, it's for the Nikes and the Coca-Colas. And one of the best definition that I could give you guys today about what branding is that it is something that you have, whether you have spent time to deliberately and strategically position and build it or not, you have a brand, and brand is perception. It happens in the mind of an audience. It's how you are being viewed. And if a business branding is successful, then you show up as value in the marketing materials and in those first points of engagements, right? So branding is very much something that could work as hard as you work on your behalf, because it's clear, it's concise, it has been strategically developed to engage an exact audience, the ones that you're trying to do business with. So don't leave it to default, you know, and it's not just your logo. In my world, our entire rebrand process takes into consideration brand, marketing, and customer experience strategies, because you could have the greatest brand and you can utilize the best tactics to engage those audiences, but if those people walk in the door and then you flop on experience, they're just going to leave you a bad review. And guess what? Those 2-star reviews are part of that perception. Today's customers, they're validating what they're dealing with before they're making buying decisions. And if you're not selling $10 products or $45 hair curlers, but your business is selling something that costs several thousands of dollars, the more education and validation is needed for someone to make sure that they're making the right decision. And they dig and they dig and they're perceiving. And if they perceive you as a value, there's a much better likelihood for them to engage. What's your next myth, Greg?
Yeah, so another one from the legal perspective is, you already suggested it, Orshi, just that only large companies need to worry about trademark protection. And that is absolutely not the case. Trademark protection is relevant for businesses of all sizes. Anyone that has a name and that is promoting that name out in the marketplace has a trademark. And that trademark is really your reputation out in the marketplace. Regardless of the scale, trademarking fundamentally is going to safeguard your brand identity, and it gives you tools to prevent others from infringing on your trademark rights, and likewise damaging your goodwill that you've worked so hard to establish out in the marketplace. So it's a proactive measure, really, that every business should consider when they're thinking about protecting all of their assets. Just for example, you know, let's say there's there's just a small company and they're operating in a single state, and they've got a great product or a fantastic service, and their growth plan is really building value in their brand and their marketplace. They're doing a great job at it. They're working hard to grow their customers and get the word out about their fantastic products and services. And they finally get to the point where that investment capital that they've been searching for, that they need to expand and blow up nationally, is finally there. And then at that point, they come in and say, "Ooh, you know, I should think about protecting my brand with the trademark." So they go to look for a federal trademark registration, and they find out that they can't use their mark in half the country because somebody else has already beat them to obtaining a trademark registration. It's a real scenario that I've seen multiple times. You know, we won't disclose the names of the innocent, but it's a scenario that I've actually seen multiple times. People will put tons of resources into developing and launching their product or their product or service and wrapping branding around it, but just in their really tight and narrow marketplace. And then when they go to expand, they're too late because they didn't go through the process of looking for broader trademark rights by way of a federal trademark registration. And now they find they're boxed in and they can't go onto a national platform, at least with their current brand, without stepping on other people's trademark rights. So again, that's something that can happen to any company really of any size that has a name, that you're giving to a product and service that you're putting out in the marketplace. And so fundamentally, it's an issue that any company of any size needs to be thinking about from the time that you put a product or service out into the marketplace. How about you, Orshi? What's another myth from the marketing side?
I'm going to just piggyback on that, because my next myth is only struggling businesses need to be considering a rebrand. However, your business that you just gave as an example was not struggling, but they sure will be struggling, because now they are actually going to have to go through probably some sort of a renaming process, and all that equity that they built and all that process that they made now has to be reintroduced to the market under potentially a new name, and that's a huge waste. So that's why trademarking and protecting your brand early on is really the best way to go. So what else? Like, you know, there's so many times that I have customers that come, and usually my customers want marketing, right? And what's special about Brand 3 is that we don't take customers to market unless the brand is designed or is already engaging an audience properly, and it's very clear and concise, and they show up as value, right? But what I see these businesses with 5-star reviews, great businesses, you know, that kind of have grown rapidly, you know, with very vague names, you know, like Northeast, I don't know, siding, right? So it's just very, and there's probably worse names than that, that doesn't even tell what they are, right? But very vague names, and they have great reviews, so that means they're doing great service and they have a great product, but they don't look it, right? So if that brand goes to market, it's not like they're struggling, you know, they have great customers, they probably get a lot of referrals, but they decided to spend money on marketing. I guarantee you they are going to waste 80% of their marketing budget, because they're channeling traffic to something that's not perceived as great. Their brand is not reflecting the greatness of the product and service that they bring to market. So they are outdated. It's not telling a story. I don't have a way as a prospective customer to perceive the value that I'm going to get if I walk in this door, right? And oftentimes, you know, I might go with someone else that actually has worse products just because they communicated clearer, right? So that's definitely a myth. You don't need to be struggling to be considering rebranding. I think you should be considering rebranding anytime you're gonna want to spend money on marketing, and just, you know, consider whether that budget is going to be well spent, because is my message clear? Do I show up as a professional organization, or is there too much noise, you know, on my website? So definitely don't have to be struggling, but if you want to be good stewards of your marketing budget, that would be a great idea to consider.
Got it. Okay, and again, so our topic here today is is signs that you want to consider rebranding. So we're going to dive in there. Let's go to the next slide. The first one that I want to talk about, the first sign, is just really the trademark infringement risk scenario. What are you looking at in the marketplace with regard to infringement risk, and might that dictate that you need to consider possibly rebranding? So if your current brand, your current brand name, your logo, or other brand elements are similar to existing trademarks in your industry, and you haven't gone through the process of obtaining a federal trademark registration maybe, then you might face the risk of trademark infringement. Obviously, if you're infringing on somebody else's rights, that's got high risk of leading to legal disputes, and litigation is costly, benefits typically the attorneys more than the litigants. But in addition to that, it creates potential damage to your brand's reputation and your own finances. So then, in addition to the need to undertake a rebranding effort, you know, you're facing these financial risks and reputational risks, even though you may have already invested tens of thousands of dollars in developing your branding. So it's important to understand on this infringement issue that the standard that's used is what we call likelihood of confusion. It's not identity between your mark and someone else's mark. If you've been through the process of setting up a company, for instance, when you set up a company and file with the state tax authority, they will essentially let any name go through as long as it's not identical to another name that's already out there. Totally different when we're in the trademark realm. The issue is likelihood of confusion. It's a question of what are the similarities between your mark and another mark that's being contested, or that's being used to challenge your rights. What are the similarities between the products and services that the marks promote? What's the similarities between the consumers, the places and the ways in which the products and services are delivered to customers? And then there's other factors. So if your brand identity is similar enough to another one to cause confusion in the marketplace, then you're going to face a serious infringement risk. Let's go to the next slide. And so then that raises a question of what do we do to reduce that risk? First thing we do out of the gate is we're going to perform a comprehensive trademark clearance search before you lock in your marks or before you're expanding your brand into other markets. Basically to identify what other conflicts already exist out there in existing trademarks. And then if similarities are found, you're going to want to consider rebranding to mitigate the risk of infringement and to avoid stepping into costly legal disputes. Then when you go through the rebranding process, really strive to make your new mark unique. Obviously, the more unique your mark is, the less it's going to be likely to cause confusion with somebody else's mark. And finally, if you have a truly unique identity, mark identity, you're building stronger trademark rights than you would with a mark that's less unique. So if a third party uses a trademark that's similar to your very distinctive mark, you're going to have a stronger case against them. The likelihood of confusion exists than if you have a mark that's made up of terms that are used by many, many other companies. So uniqueness is key when you go through the process of rebranding. Make sure you're selecting a mark that is truly unique. Okay, next slide. And Orshi, what's your first sign?
Let me just ask you a quick question. When you say mark, you mean the name and the visual, or just the visual? Like, you know, like how there's a logo symbol like the Nike swoosh, or right. The name itself? Like
yeah, that's a good point, because when I say mark is short for trademark or service mark, and so it can be text, it can be a design like the Nike swoosh, It can be a combination of text and design. It can be text that's formatted in a particular way. Any of those things that are your brand presence to promote your product or service. All of those fall under the definition of what we geeky trademark lawyers call marks.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, so here's my number one sign. Your marketing is not working. You're not getting results. It's exactly what I said in that myth. You know, you are spending a lot of money on marketing. You are probably, you know, in most cases when I talk to business owner, when I even ask them what they mean by marketing, they immediately go to tactics. You know, SEO, email newsletter, direct mail, blog. These are, you know, social media, obviously, like, you know, Facebook, Instagram, like these tactics are the first things that are coming to mind. And they are everywhere, even if they don't need to be, just because it's a trend, or they are dealing with a marketing company that's selling digital marketing packages where they do 3 times this, 4 times that, you know, per month, and you know, they're not really getting the results. So, you know, when this happens, rebrand is definitely the way to go. And I mean a strategic rebrand. Again, rebrand is not only about visuals, it's definitely about words, about positioning, and it takes into consideration a lot of components of the business. So if you go to the next slide, please. In order to fix the marketing problem, right, you want to start with strategy and not tactics. One of the greatest asset, and where we start always, is to figure out where the company is trying to go. All right, so, you know, I always ask customers, like, if this is a wild and crazy success, what are we trying to get to? You know, are you trying to go from 2 million to 10 million to 10 million to 50 million? What are some of the revenue goals that you may have? And what is the vision of the leadership team and the owner, right? There are times when I find that marketing isn't working because the owner is the brand. You know, when they have 20 plus or 40 employees, but they're still the reason that people come to do business with the company. And if you can find that by looking at your customer reviews. If your customers say, or she this, or she that, Greg this, Greg that, then you know, they're not referring back to your business name. You know, you're referring to you. That's owner dependency. That can be fixed with rebranding also. So another one is that you're going to have to define your ideal customer. You know, I find businesses trying to do way too much with their marketing. We're going to put this on the direct mail, but then we're also going to tell them that we do this and we do this and we do this. And then you're all of a sudden everybody's everything, and there's no focal point. You know, there are many businesses that have multiple market segments. A roofing company that has commercial and residential roofing services are dealing with two very distinct market segments. A homeowner will want very different things than a property manager. They are motivated by different things, and how we show up to them as value is going to be distinctly different, even though roofing is the common thing, right? And there's a way to define messaging to cater to that ideal customer and show up as value. And lastly, remember that you're not the hero. Donald Murrell has wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. And Miller did a genius job on educating business owners on how to change their perspective of putting themselves to be a hero to putting themselves to be a guide. Your customer is the hero, and you're essentially helping them to get from A to B. All right. So if you have a website that says, we do this, we do that, we are family owned, we are whatever, no one cares. Now, they do care after you hook them with something that's valuable to them. So I'm not saying you can't talk about yourself. There's a reason to show authority. But what matters first at that first point of engagement is what's in it for me, because that's the question is they are asking. And if you fail to answer that question within seconds, then my kids cried, my dog barked, my phone rang, and I'm out. And you just lost me because you kept talking about yourself, and it's not relevant to me. You need to show up as value with what value you bring to them and how you guide them to success, or to guide them to solving a problem, or guide them to eliminate a pain point, or whatever have you. Figure out what problem you solve for your customers and speak that first. All right, what's your second one, Greg?
Let's go to the next slide there. This one might seem obvious, but just if you're lacking formal trademark protections, that might be a pretty significant sign that you need to take some action. It's really important to have a cohesive and thought out and deliberate strategy that combines both your legal protection with your intentional branding efforts to fundamentally manage and influence how your business is perceived in the eye of the public. So if your brand elements, what we were talking about before, the text that makes up your mark, the design or logo that makes up your mark, the combined elements that make up your mark, if those are not adequately protected through trademark registrations, because you might need to have separate registrations for the separate pieces, you may be more vulnerable to infringement by competitors. Without the proper legal protections in place, your recourse to prevent others from using similar marks is going to be significantly more limited and potentially dilute your brand's distinctiveness and your overall market presence. So how do we address that? Let's go to the next slide. First and foremost, you want to register those different brand elements. So your names, logos, slogans, you want to do that with the relevant trademark authorities to secure proper legal protection. Even if you're just operating in a single state, you could obtain a state trademark registration. Then when you expand your services or your products into interstate commerce, you could pursue federal trademark registration. But it's important to be doing that with the appropriate trademark authorities that govern, that are in place where you're actually doing business. Also, you want to file your trademark application as soon as you've locked in your brand identity. Even if you don't yet have promotional materials out there that are promoting whatever your product or service is, just understand that you have the option of filing an application for federal U.S. trademark registration based on having a true intention to use the mark in the future. So you can file either based on, hey, I'm out there right now, I'm using the mark, or I've got a bona fide intention to use the mark in the future. Either one of those are appropriate grounds for filing an application for federal trademark registration. And the earlier you file, the better. Just be aware that you cannot change the mark in your application after you file that application. So, and you would ultimately have to start using the mark out in commerce but before you would be able to get that registration granted from the Patent and Trademark Office. So file as early as possible. Be sure to use that mark out in the marketplace so that you can ultimately get through to registration. And remember that you can't change the mark after you filed it. So be sure that design is locked in at the time that you file the application. Also, once your mark is registered, you want to be using the mark that you've actually registered in the form in which it's registered. I can't tell you how many times I've helped clients go through the process of obtaining a federal trademark registration. And then when it comes time for renewal, 5 years down the road, we're going to help out with that filing. We say, okay, let's collect some evidence of use to show how we're using the mark now, and it's changed. Well, if the mark has changed from the way in which it was registered and you're not using it in the form in which it was originally registered, you're going to lose rights to that registered mark. So it's important to ensure that the mark that you've registered is continuously being used out in the marketplace so that you can maintain those trademark rights. And you want to keep using that registered mark on a continuous basis. Because trademarks have to be renewed, and the renewal requires evidence that you have been continuously using that mark out in the marketplace. You can't just use it for a year to get your registration and then come back 5 years later, start using it again just to have the trademark renewed to block others from using that name. You need to be continuously and regularly using whatever that mark is that you've registered to be able to maintain those rights. Looking to speed us up just a little, so it went a little short there, but Orshi, how about for you? What's your next branding sign?
I have another question before I go to my next for you. When you say register the trademark as soon as you have those logo files, it's maybe a comment. I just want to remind viewers that creating a logo, a good logo, will be based on a lot of strategic efforts and work, right? So coming up with names even before you do a logo or you start doing designing, it's a really good idea to get with a trademark attorney to vet before that effort happens, because it takes time to craft a distinct mark and a unique mark. As you can hear from Greg, it has to be really unique and distinctive, and it's based on strategy. So some ideas, I think it's true, Greg, right? That you can show preliminary ideas and name ideas and have a trademark attorney kind of do a research prior to investing into the design side of things.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things that we universally recommend is doing a search up front before you spend money on the actual application process. And so yes, it's a great idea to brainstorm about, okay, what are the different branding options that I have? What do I like? And then get those cleared so that you can hone in on what you truly want to pursue. And then once you've selected that brand presence, then go and pursue a trademark filing strategy.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So my number 2 is plateau. Stagnant growth or declining market performance. There's so many businesses that just hit a ceiling and boom, like can't break through. So it is, I think, definitely a sign that things have changed, because stagnancy can be caused by multiple factors, and it could be referring to some major changes in your industry. So let's go to the next slide and discuss how to get it right. So you want to analyze your service offering against current market trends. Like take a look at what is causing the problem. Sometimes these problems of hitting the ceiling is external, but sometimes it's also internal. It's maybe you're dealing with a lot of employee turnover. You can't keep your employees excited to stay long enough, and it takes hiring and recruiting. It can be a tremendous problem and could cause stagnancy. And so just analyze what is causing the problem. You can use some market research, and obviously your customers are your best resources to tap into to collect feedback. Yes, you can look at your reviews and Google review platform and social media platforms to read your reviews, but what is stopping you from reaching out to customers and having some one-on-ones and asking them, what are we doing right? What can we do better? And really building that feedback back into your strategy. Obviously, like we have said before, you want to make sure that your marketing efforts are reaching the ideal prospects that you're going after. So many times companies are everywhere. If you are primarily targeting other businesses, you might not need to spend a lot of time to be on Facebook, unless you're some sort of a nighttime business, like a restaurant or whatever. I don't even know, but like B2B kind of stuff, like spend more effort on LinkedIn for that kind of stuff. Sometimes we tend to follow trends and not logic, and that's why that strategic plan that holds everything together is so important, because then You're going where your customers are hanging out, right? That's where you need to put your dollars. So, and then, you know, you want to also identify opportunities for, you know, how to differentiate from your competitors. Like what is, you know, again, using that customer feedback. What are the things that you're doing right? Tap into that and elevate that. You know, like this is a unique qualifier for you to do business with us, and it should be elevated. And definitely consider tailoring your marketing efforts to a specific segment even. You know, maybe you got stagnant because you're serving too many customers, but you know, maybe, you know, like for example, I so many times run into, well, we do this, and then we have industry A, industry B, market C, market B, you know, we're doing all these things. And once we dig deeper, it's very clear that these top two are the biggest heavy hitters when it comes to revenue. And we're doing too many little things, you know, so consider your market segments and see if you're trying to get in front of them with really what matters to them. You know, if for example, I did a brand for a commercial door company, and a commercial door company, their ideal customer was a general contractor. This is so broad, okay, but they told me that one of their specialty is hospital doors, like healthcare type of buildings, right? So if I'm a general contractor that specializes in healthcare buildings, right, and I see a door company coming to me with healthcare specific languages, and now we're talking about key card entry, you know, safety, you know, speed of opening or whatever have you that's relevant in that market, you know, it's much more likely for me to pay attention because that's my world, right? Speak their language. It's so important. And hopefully if you go through that effort and reposition yourself in that way, that will, you know, kind of help you break through that ceiling and hit the next level. All right, what's your number 3?
Okay, I'm going to try to zip through this one pretty quickly. So market expansion. We'll have clients that at times want to establish new branding because they're going into a new market, basically. So that's great. You want to freshen up your brand. You want a new look. You want to adapt it to whatever the new whatever the new market is. That said, it can be really challenging and you know, really mostly impossible to maintain a trademark that you're not using anymore. So it raises a question of, if you're shifting to a new brand, are you okay with some third party coming in and adopting the old one that you're not using anymore, or are there strategies that you can adopt to try to maintain at least some of that goodwill that you've established by using the old prior mark? And let's go to the next slide. So some things to think about is number one, when you're adopting a new brand, first, you can't change or update your existing trademark registration. The existing trademark registration covers what it covers. So if you've got something new, that's going to require that you pursue a new registration. But if you have a new tweak or a twist that incorporates some elements of your current brand, you can file a new application for a new federal registration that will then coexist with your company's existing trademark. So maybe there's a design element that you could add, or maybe there's another term that you can add to the new mark that adapts it for this new market, this new consumer base, but still carries forward some of the goodwill that you've already established. And doing this can be a really, really good choice, especially if you've built that value over a number of years and you've got that established goodwill that's already associated with your brand. Your existing consumers know that mark, know the brand, know the quality that's associated with it. You don't want to lose that. So adding those new tweaks or new design look to the old brand or additional text, if it's done right, will let you maintain, oftentimes, the prior trademark rights while still wrapping protection around the new branding, the new look that you've got for the new market. This way, you'll still have at least argument that there's a likelihood of confusion if somebody pops up and is using, just your old brand. And really, just most fundamentally, you don't want to lose that legacy value and the goodwill that by transitioning to a completely new appearance. So we'll frequently coach clients through the process of, hey, we're looking to change, we're looking to freshen up. Okay, let's look at what those elements are. Let's look at what those design elements are. Is there a way to bring in some of those old elements so that we carry through that consistency of the goodwill that's associated with the prior branding presence and bring that forward into the future of what you're doing now? Okay, and let's go to the next slide. Orshi, how about you? What's your next sign?
Yep. So my next one is unqualified leads and poor customer experience. All right, so this is a very, very typical problem. Many marketing companies will promise you leads, okay? But if they're not doing a strategic approach to marketing, it's more based on tactics, you're gonna get leads up the wahoo, and 99.999% of them will be trash. And that is very, very frustrating because they promise you leads. You need to ask for qualified leads, all right? So it's a lot of waste of time when the leads are not qualified, because you're wasting your time talking to them, engaging them, and essentially it's going nowhere because they're not ideal customers. And then poor customer experience is getting those bad reviews. That's a whole different ball game. Definitely would consider a rebrand on that. So let's go to the next slide and look at some strategies. So in order for leads to be qualified, you have to communicate your market value clearly through a very concise message and very quickly show up as value, right? So that means, let's say the top half of your homepage, right? You're gonna have a logo, you're gonna have menu items here, and you're gonna have a message, all right? I should immediately know some of the following, which is what category of this business is, right? So, sometimes the logo or the words are too creative, believe it or not. Creative can be your enemy, because it's like some creative or clever way of saying something, and it's just not enough to help me make a decision whether I care or not, right? And then I got distracted, right? So communicate very clearly, but make sure that I know what industry. So say, if you're an IT company, say IT services somewhere, you know what I mean? Very quickly, because if I don't need IT services, then I can go away. But if I do, then I can pay attention to the rest, right? So the category is really important, and the value that you bring. Like, what about IT? What way are you benefiting me? Tell me that very clearly, and then I can read the rest. Define your brand promise. When we go to market, the brand makes a promise to a prospective customer. And if that customer actually becomes a customer and walks in the door, and I did not deliver the promise, that's how I get bad reviews, right? You lied. You said on the billboard that you have exceptional customer service. I just went and called you and had spent 45 minutes being pushed from people to people, and they did not serve me well. That's a lie. And that's when angry customers will go and leave reviews. It's a lot easier to piss someone off and get a bad review than to do a great job and get a great review, right? So, when it comes to great reviews, however, and you're doing a good job serving your customers, be sure to ask specifically for a 5-star review. They tell you, oh, wow, thank you, this is great, I really, really appreciate you. Oh, that's wonderful. Would you please go on Google or wherever and leave us a 5-star review? Because you're building that perception of who you are to the next prospective customer. You can conduct surveys like NPS. I don't know if you guys know about the Net Promoter Score, but basically it allows you to gauge where your customers are, who are detractors, who are promoters, and immediately give you a lot of feedback on what you're doing right and what needs to be improved. and you know, that feedback can help you develop strategy to address customer experience problems. Now, here's the biggest key, okay? When customer experience suffers, it could be that your culture and your people internally have not been trained on your brand promise. They don't know how to and what to deliver to those customers. So brand leads marketing, but brand also leads recruiting and hiring. Like as I've said and mentioned before, you can actually hire people consciously to deliver a promise to your customer. They are the ones who need to do that job well, right? So, you know, that's a really, really important key to rebranding, is how that then trickles internally to help you build a culture that's intentionally catering to that promise that you're promising on the marketing side of things, right? And then lastly, there's this exercise of mapping the customer journey, where you would take your most ideal customer and walk them through the touch points of your services, and seeing where, at which point we could elevate the experience, what needs to be built into the processes to actually do better. Because, you know, and there's actually a really good example. We did a brand for a landscaping company that does gorgeous pools, all right? And we did a customer journey map experience with them, where we found that it's all fine and dandy until the big truck and digger show up and make your backyard this muddy pit, you know, and that's when the customer's hyperventilating, like, what the heck did I sign up for? How long will this be taking? It's so loud. So in that moment and that touch point, we were able to take the rendering that they signed off on and made a large poster and put it by the back door to A, halfway cover the mud, and B, to remind them what's coming. So it's just small thing. It's like it's a $50 investment to make that customer feel better about what you're doing, right? And remind them why they actually are doing this, right? So just think about these kind of things as tools in your back pocket for rebrand. Right, what's next?
Okay, yep, next slide. Outdated or generic branding. So a lot of folks have marks that have very descriptive terms, sometimes generic terms in their mark. And while that might be fine as they're starting out, as their market competition grows, that lack of distinctiveness may dictate that it's time to look at rebranding. Outdated or generic branding can really make it hard to differentiate your business from your competitors, and just generally weaken your ability to protect your brand. And I get, Orsolya has made this point already. I get that a lot of companies want to, in their branding, tell the consumer what it is that they do, and so they'll use descriptive terms. But with the descriptive mark, others are likely using the same descriptive terms in their own marks in the same business space. You know, and then for those that are using totally generic terms, let's say for the term shoes in the mark Shazam shoes, you know, absolutely no protection attaches to the generic terms. So you really want to try to be as distinctive as possible when you're selecting your branding presence. So let's go to the next slide. So what do we do on that front of trying to identify those really distinctive characteristics? First, you want to evaluate the distinctiveness and relevance of your current brand identity in the marketplace. Am I using descriptive terms in my current brand presence that's out there that's facing the consumers? If your branding elements are generic or they're outdated, you really need to consider rebranding to create a more distinctive and a more legally protectable brand identity that sets you apart from competitors. Yes, it's great to tell people in your brand what it is that you do, but understand that you're going to build way, way, way stronger trademark value if you've got terms that are really distinctive. Okay, what's our next sign, Orshi?
Changing business objectives or audiences. This is very similar to a lot of things that I mentioned, but if your goals and vision changes, you know, there could be a sign to rebrand. So let's go to the next slide. In this case, you want to evaluate the changes in your business objectives and make sure that you align your brand accordingly, right? You can't expect to change your business objectives and not touch your brand. You know, it's not going to work. Somehow it needs to show up so the market is aware of that change, right? You want to adapt marketing strategies to effectively engage any new target audience. So very similar to all the things, you know, strategically position your brand to create as value to those new audiences. You can conduct market research to tailor your offering, and you absolutely 100% have your current customers, friends, associates, you know, and focus groups to help you validate these ideas. You know, you got to make sure before you change business objectives, obviously you want to make sure that there's a ripe market there, you know, and then the question is, what are we dealing with? Is that a really saturated market with lots of competitors? You know, how do we show up distinctively? You know, and is this actually related to your core business that you are changing from, or is it completely different? So is it a rebrand or is it a whole new business? You know, and that's going to be defined based on the market audience, and you know how this can be tied into your past. Now, what I'm saying to you, a lot of times, if we can do a rebrand, I always recommend a rebrand, because if the existing brand had a lot of you know, good things and reputation coming with it, you can tap into that audience versus starting something new. All right, what's your last sign, Greg?
Yeah, the final one is where originally distinctive trademarks become generic. So I was just talking a minute ago about the nature of different terms and marks. Some may be descriptive, some may be generic. Some might start out as distinctive and ultimately become generic. Obviously, a trademark is supposed to distinguish a company's goods or services from their competitors' products and services. And if your mark becomes generic, becomes a just vastly regularly used term just out in the marketplace or by consumers even, because the term is what the public generally uses to refer to that type of product or service, then it's generic and it can totally lose its trademark value. A couple of examples are terms aspirin and cellophane that actually started out originally as distinctive terms, distinctive trademarks, but they became so pervasively used by the public that all trademark protection for them was gone. And now we call the bottle of Bayer brand analgesic aspirin, right? And anybody else's similar product out there is aspirin. Another example is Xerox and Kleenex. A lot of people have heard this story, but Xerox and Kleenex have been at risk of their marks being subject to genericide, becoming generic. And they've had to go to great lengths to ensure that that their marks aren't becoming generic by doing things in their promotional materials, by doing things on their packaging, to really combat that risk. Because I mean, how many times have you asked somebody sitting next to you, hey, can I have a Kleenex, when what you want is a tissue and you don't care whether it's Kleenex brand or not? So that can be difficult to police against. So let's go to the next slide and just some quick takeaways. You know, one of the first things that you want to do if you've got a famous mark, you need to monitor the marketplace to watch for improper uses of whatever those famous marks are. Not just by your licensees or authorized users, but also by the public generally. There we go. Then if somebody is misusing the term in a way that the public is regularly seeing that misuse, for instance, on their website, then take action. Send a cease and desist letter, stop the misuse. And of course, you can also use cease and desist letters where somebody's actually using your mark in a branding sense for their own products or services. But if somebody is misusing a term and it's genericizing your mark, you really need to take action to protect against that. But most importantly, you want to ensure that you're maintaining strong, open, and pervasive use of your mark as a brand of your products and services. It's Kleenex brand tissue. It's Xerox brand photocopiers. It's Whiteford brand of legal services. And so as you're using that mark out in the marketplace, you want to ensure that you're using it in that branding sense so that it doesn't become a generic term and result in you losing your trademark rights in it. And Orshi, how about you? What's your final sign?
That's fascinating. My final sign is losing market share to your competitors. And again, a lot of this is similar to all the things that have been mentioned. So let's go to the next slide. You know, you want to conduct a competitive analysis to monitor industry trends. You want to understand your competitive landscape. You know, here's that Donald Miller quote: even if we have the best product in the marketplace, we'll lose to an inferior product if our competitors' offer is communicated more clearly. So make sure that you're clearly communicating the value that you bring to market. And you know, in that communication, once you understand your competitors, differentiate. I every single time I ask clients, tell me what you're doing differently or better. Why are you better? They always have answers, but it's not obvious to me when I look at their old websites. You know, they're not clearly communicating their unique qualifiers and differentiators. So that's the way to do. And I think that's a wrap. And now we can go to Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Greg and Orshi. I think we have time to squeeze in one question here. Someone asked, how much does rebranding cost? Obviously, that's pretty broad, but is there a range that you can speak to?
Yes. So there's generally rebranding is an investment. Okay, so I wouldn't say that it's a cost, because it will definitely make a difference. If your brand isn't working on your behalf, you know, then that would be a cost. But if you're building something that is going to help you engage a market much better, then that's an investment. And you know, rebranding comes with a lot of things. It's not just a logo. It's not just a website. When we touch the logo, we essentially touching your signage, your vehicles, your marketing materials, your billing materials, your proposal cover, your PowerPoint presentations. Everything has to be touched with the rebranding. So you gotta be aware that it's an investment, you know, and legal and protecting that mark is also part of that rebranding. You know, we find customers that they don't have a brand guidelines documentations. They don't know what shade of color is that purple or red that they're using. You know, they don't know their color codes. So there's no consistency the way they show up. You know, the logo is squished on this material and stretched this way on that material because it was square. You know, there's a way to protect the brand so that it shows up consistently, and it needs to be across the board. So I would say a rebrand for a $3 to $10 million company will cost generally about $50,000, and that will have all the assets completed. And now if you have a website that has 700 pages, then it's going to be a lot more. But you know, just a basic 5-6 page website would be included in that, and on all the assets that you need.
Thank you, Orshi. Greg, maybe a real quick one for you, and then we can close out here. You said it was easy to get a federal trademark registration. Why did they need a lawyer?
Well, yeah, that's a little bit of a loaded question, probably more than I've got to get into too much detail on. But fundamentally, there are a lot of nuances even at the start of the process. There are parts of the application, including your description of goods or services, that can be quite nuanced. That can lead to prolonged argument with the examiner. You certainly want to select a mark that's sufficiently distinct. So having somebody with a skill set to vet, is this sufficiently distinct? When I look at the other marks that are already out there, that's a skill that a trademark attorney would be able to bring to the process. And then if you're going through the examination process and the examiner cites something against you, you're going to have to argue back to the examiner. And that's legal briefing and really a legal exercise that you need to engage in at that point. So it's possible that you can file your own trademark application. The USPTO will work with you through the process, but yes, despite the fact that I guess I'm a little bit biased, it's a process that warrants representation as you go through that process.
All right, thank you so much. We are right at 12:30. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, you will get a link to the recording as well as a copy of the presentation. If we did not get to your question, please don't hesitate to reach out. And on behalf of Whiteford and Brand 3, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.